On today's show, how are the Chicago Blackhawks prospects doing? We'll look at that in detail on today's episode of Locked On NHL Prospects.
You are Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, and welcome back to Locked On NHL Prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. On this podcast, we break down everything prospects related for you 5 days a week, Monday to Friday. I'm Hadi Kalakash, QMJHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects, with Sebastian High, USHL and crossover scout for Elite Prospects. And on today's show, we'll be breaking down the Chicago Blackhawks prospects pipeline in detail. We'll look at the NHL prospects in the first segment: Connor Bedard, Lukas Reichel, and some of the guys who played some NHL games already: Korchinski, Nazar, those kinds of guys. In the second segment, we'll look at Artyom Levshunov, Colton Dach, more of the AHL prospects right now. And in the final segment, we'll be looking at the prospects in the pipeline: Oliver Moore, John Mustard, AJ Spellacy. There's a long list of guys to go through. But before we get into any of that, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get up to $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 moneyline bet. If you're watching on YouTube, as usual, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode. And if you're listening on your favorite podcasting platform, please leave us a rate and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. So let's get things started right away here in the NHL. What's happening with Connor Bedard in his draft +2? Some fans are frustrated with Luke Richardson regarding his deployment of Connor Bedard this season. Talk with you what's going on that side.
Yeah, so it's been a bit of a slow start overall for the Chicago Blackhawks. They've been playing very low event hockey all season, which is perhaps not what the fans of a rebuilding team want to be seeing, because the goaltending has been excellent. Arvid Soderblom and Peter Mrazek have been a very strong pairing early on in this 24-25 season, but the goals have been very dry going forward. Even Connor Bedard, who's leading the team in points by 4, only has 15 points in 21 games. There's only 2 other players that have cracked the 10-point marker as well. So it's been very low event hockey this season, and Connor Bedard's been a bit more stifled with the puck. He hasn't had as much puck luck with the puck going in, with only 3 goals in 21 games this season. And for a player with his quality of not only shot, but goal scoring habits and instincts, that is a lot less than his personal hope would be and what fans were hoping for this season as well. But overall, he's still a fantastically dynamic player, but it's just been a bit slower moving forward. But there has been a bit more of a refinement in the defensive habits with Connor Bedard this season. He's been picking up defensive reads more fluidly. He's been switching assignments a lot more comfortably as well in the defensive zone. It just hasn't been very flashy at all so far this season, which can, of course, be frustrating. But this is still a franchise talent who's going to be just fine with time, but just will need a little bit more games this season to really get into his goal-scoring groove.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the surrounding skill not living up to par so far this year hasn't helped either. I mean, Taylor Hall's a healthy scratch at times. Like, things aren't going well in terms of the veterans either. So I think it's important for kind of Bedard to get back to form quick. But, I chalk it down to a sophomore slump. He was really good last year, and he's a phenomenal prospect. He's got generational upside. I still fully believe that Bedard is, I'm not worried at all. This kid has adapted to everything, every single thing he's faced so far. So not worried at all. But let's talk about Lukas Reichel, who's been, he had a poor year last year, only 16 points in 65 games. That's not a really good point total. He was sent down to Rockford as well. For 22-year-olds, not ideal, but this season so far, he's sort of slowly getting back to form. 8 points in 17 games, 2 goals and 6 assists for the Blackhawks this year. And looking a lot more solid in his decision-making, his processing, his transition play. It's a very interesting prospect. Dynamic, really, really good reads when he gets on. But when he's off, it's kind of a confidence thing. Reichel's at his best when he's playing with full confidence in his skill set. We didn't see that at all last year. This season, he's slowly getting that confidence back. Half a point a game ain't half bad. But there's still another layer, another tier for Reichel to reach. I mean, we're talking about a former first-round pick, a player who genuinely has, for me, second line upside if he works out. But it's kind of slowly but surely getting back into form for him, but there's still some room to grow, some room to improve. I'm going to be keeping a close eye on Reichel moving forward. Now let's talk about some guys who are currently in the AHL but have played some NHL games. Kevin Korchinski's up first. He's played the whole season so far in the AHL, right? How's he been so far? I mean, I've seen a couple highlights, but haven't really caught many Rockford games. So talk me through how he's doing.
Yeah, he's been like perfectly okay in the AHL so far. He's been comfortable with the puck on his stick. He's been playing quite a few minutes as well with Artyom Levshunov so far this season, which has been a very young pairing in the AHL. And we'll get into Levshunov's game in a second. But overall, he's been all right. Like Korchinski's a player I've always, I think, struggled a little bit with in comparison to other scouts in terms of really seeing the high degree of upside. I think the tools are fantastic, but the ideas supporting them have always been a bit porous at times for me. But so far this season, he has a goal and 7 points in 15 games in Rockford, and he's playing a lot of minutes, obviously, on that team. But there's been a lot more like solid defensive play coming from other players in that same lineup, whether it be Ethan Del Mastro, for instance. Who's also played some minutes with Korchinski. But overall, I think with Korchinski, there's been a couple steps taken this season in his defensive reads, in his ability to cover passing lanes, and just being active with his stick, because he isn't the biggest guy. He isn't overly physically involved. So he has to really adapt his defensive game to be more effective at the pro level. And we really saw that struggling in the NHL last season. Like, he could easily be exploited by pacey, skilled wingers, just beating him to the outside, cutting across, and just like targeting his triangle like with a lot more ease than you would want a 4% overall pick to concede. But overall, I think it's been a fine start to the season. We're only 15 games into this campaign for Korchinski, so a lot to be left to be seen, and hopefully he'll be called up to the NHL at some point as well to show his chops there, maybe get some second power play minutes there too. But overall, I think it's been all right for Korchinski this season. It's been a bit less all right for Artyom Levshunov, right? A player that I think we both really, really wanted to see sent back to the NCAA rather than being signed to this season, because even though he's incredibly toolsy, there's still a lot of habits and a lot of details that still have to come a long way, and that's been very obvious so far in the AHL, right?
For sure. There's a couple prospects we'll get to before, just to make sure that we cover kind of the NHL guys, the guys who've played NHL games. Levshunov will be the first guy we talk about in the second segment. I do want to spend a bit of time on Frank Nazar, because he's been absolutely phenomenal. 16 points in 14 games so far in the AHL, playing genuinely like an NHLer. All of the details are there. Defensive acumen, the offensive plays, the transition routes are phenomenal. Still a phenomenal goal scorer with insane vision in terms of playmaking. Genuinely, I don't think there's really much more for Nazar to prove in the AHL. He's going to be an NHLer very, very, very soon. He's already played with the Hawks 3 games last season at the end of the year. For me, it's just a matter of time before Nazar gets called up and plays top 6 minutes. He's proved it for me so far. He has nothing left to prove on that side. We have 2 defensemen, though, who are very interesting that I was kind of surprised to see play some games for the Blackhawks this year. First, Nolan Allan, who was a pick in 2021 of the Chicago Blackhawks. Kind of your stay-at-home defensive defenseman. How's he been doing so far this year?
He's been perfectly solid in third pairing minutes. Like, he's mainly playing around like 13 minutes a night. Last couple of games, he's played 15, 18, 16 minutes. So getting a little bit more trust as well from the coaching staff, because he is just a mobile, defensively oriented player. And in terms of a young prospect getting these chances in the NHL lineup, that's certainly a profile that Luke Richardson will value. I mean, it's the same profile that he had as a defenseman as well in his own career, and certainly prioritized that profile in his time as an assistant coach in Montreal, focusing on the defense as well in the cup run. I mean, he loved Ben Sherratt. He loved Joel Edmondson. Nolan Allan is kind of up that alley in terms of physical, bruising, mobile, closes gaps quickly and aggressively. Doesn't always make good reads with the puck on his stick, but is pretty trustworthy in his own zone while defending. Mm-hmm. The other player is a rather different profile, and that's Wyatt Kaiser, more mobile puck-moving defenseman, 6 foot, 172 pounds. How's he been so far this season, and what did you maybe see in his draft that led to him being drafted in the 3rd round and then progressing all the way to an NHLer just 4 years later?
Yeah, it's the mobility and the passing ability. I think those are kind of the staples of his game. It hasn't translated to points so far. Like I said, 1 point in 19 games. Been averaging about 15 minutes of ice time a game. He reached over 20 at times, but I think settling a bit more into a simplistic role. When what I really liked about Kaiser were the complex passing plays. I think that that's kind of a reflex you see a lot from undersized defensemen is, let's get rid of the puck in an easy way that kind of keeps the puck on our sticks, but doesn't really lead to many kind of high-end chances. But I think inevitably Kaiser's point totals are going to kind of skyrocket over the next couple of years. He's not going to be a 1 point every 20 game player for the rest of his career. He's got the upside for it. So I'm looking forward to see how he progresses. But that's our first segment done. We'll get into the second segment where we look at the AHL guys. So Artyom Levshunov, Colton Dach, Samuel Savoie, Ethan Del Mastro, and Drew Commesso in just a sec. But just before, a quick word from our sponsors at FanDuel.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You can take your swings on American football, but European football as well, with the Champions League now running in full force. Or maybe you prefer tennis or golf, or if you're listening to this podcast, perhaps hockey is your sport of choice. Whatever it may be, FanDuel has something to interest every kind of sports fan. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Alrighty, so moving on to our second segment here, we'll be talking about the AHL guys, the guys who either just joined or have been in the AHL for a while, but haven't played an NHL game yet. And the conversation starts with Artyom Levshunov. Just picked second overall this past draft. Big, mobile, right shot defenseman who loves to jump up and plays. He's experimenting with his game, and I think that's translating as well so far in the AHL. He's still trying things, making a bunch of mistakes, yes. But it's more an issue of just like not knowing what works yet in the AHL. Probably should have been a returnee to the NCAA. The Blackhawks decided it would be better for him to get signed right away, start playing pro hockey. I can understand the arguments for it, but for me so far, I've got some games where he was just not good, and I've got some games where he looked a bit better. He played a game against Iowa a couple weeks ago where he looked decent, was trying things, moving up in play, activating offensively. He's still figuring out how it works, but there's some hints of him trying things and some of those things succeeding. I think it's just a matter of calibrating that kind of toggle of when to go, when not to go. When to go all in, when to fold, that kind of stuff. But so far, very interesting prospect, and it's normal. He's 18, 19 years old and still figuring it out in the pros. That's nothing new. We've seen that before. But Colton Dach has been pretty interesting this year, right?
Yeah, he has been. It's been a solid beginning to the campaign for him in the AHL. I mean, he was already playing with Rockford last season, where he was able to get his feet wet a little bit. He scored 27 points in 48 games last year, and then this year he's already been up to 11 points in 15 games, which is good for a tied position in second in scoring on the team, only behind Frank Nazar, who, as we discussed earlier, has been on fire this season. So he's been playing some really solid top six minutes for Rockford, providing a lot of quick give and go plays. He's a big physical center at 6'4", 196 pounds, but he's also a really mechanically gifted shooter. He's been using that shot a lot more intelligently to also support his playmaking game. The look-offs, the fake shots into passes, it's become more fluid, more frequent in his game, and he's overall just become a lot more versatile in his on-puck play offensively. Defensively, I think there's still a couple holes in his game, but overall the effort level has been there this season, and the reads have been progressing. So a lot to like with Colton Dach. I think that staying in the AHL for this season would do him a lot of good. I don't think he should be rushed to the NHL this year, but maybe at some point during the course of next season, he'll get a call up and maybe stick with the Blackhawks. But one more player we want to talk about in the AHL is Samuel Savoie. a player that we've talked about a little bit on the podcast in recent weeks, a really intense 5'10", 190-pound winger / center, who I watched a decent amount in his draft year with the Gatineau Olympique in 2022. And he's been decent so far this season. His first AHL campaign, getting used to the professional pace of play. Only 5 points in 15 games, playing a bottom six role, but he's bringing that intensity. He's playing his game, and he's just playing with incessant pace as well. Like whether it be the pace of his feet and his movement, or just the pace of his thinking as well. He's been pretty solid in his first couple games here.
Yeah, absolutely. I've always liked this game. Just a very straightforward, hit you along the boards, win the puck, get off the boards kind of player. Very interesting overall, and I'm curious to see how he continues to develop. But we have a very interesting defenseman to talk about as well. Ethan Del Mastro has been playing the year in the AHL. I've really liked this game so far. It's just your stay-at-home shutdown defenseman, but he has a lot of details in his shutdown game that makes him very, very good. I mean, the mobility is a plus for me. I still like the way that he's able to close gaps quickly, efficiently, with the right timing. His rush defending and in zone defending still very much axed on reads rather than pure tools. He's still a 6'4", 210-pound defenseman, but it's not like he over relies on that physical advantage in order to defend that reach. He's able to use it, but he uses it well because he reads the game well, and that I think shows a lot of promise for Del Mastro. I see an NHLer in Del Mastro, maybe not in a high end capacity, maybe a number 5 defenseman, kind of the stalwart on a third pair, something like that. But so
maybe
far,
number 4 as well. I think there is that like upper echelon of upside too.
For sure. I think that's a realistic expectation on that side as well. So far, 3 points in 15 games in the AHL, but again, points don't matter in the AHL for defensemen. They really, really don't. If you're a shutdown guy, you're not going to get a lot of offensive zone starts. And he's playing to his strengths, which is good. I think that this is good for his kind of development. Even though he had 37 points in 69 games last year, including playing 2 NHL games as well. I still think, this access on defensive focus, this ability to run the defensive game well is working wonders for his game. And lastly, Drew Commesso, who's been having kind of an off year this year, right?
He has been, unfortunately. I mean, he's only played 7 games so far. He's playing a 1B role at the moment with Mitchell Weeks in the crease there in Rockford. Mitchell Weeks, who isn't even signed to an NHL contract. He's an AHL contracted goalie. But Commesso has played 7 games so far and has an .872 save percentage, which just hasn't been ideal. It's also been a bit of a contrast to the goaltending story in Chicago. I mean, they've gotten some excellent performances, perhaps slightly surprisingly, so far this season. And I mean, last year, Commesso had a really solid like rookie campaign as a professional player in Rockford, had a .906 save percentage in 38 games, and even put up a .915 in 3 playoff appearances in a first round loss for Rockford. So he's a pretty solid netminder, a good prospect at just 22 years old. He definitely has a lot of room to still progress and grow, but his start to the season has been less than ideal. But that wraps up this second segment. In the next one, we're going to dive into all the non-professional or players NHL in the organization already.
Yeah.
In like the prospect pool, whether it be Sacha Boisvert or Merrick Vanacker, who's still out with injury, unfortunately. But a lot of names of first-round draft picks here to talk about. I mean, Chicago's prospect pool is a very deep one. But first, a quick message from our sponsors here at Prize Picks. PrizePicks is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long with PrizePicks. PrizePicks invented the flex play, which means that you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. PrizePicks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are safe, secure, and very, very fast. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25% to provide even more value to your lineups. Do you think Connor McDavid will get more than 0.5 goals next week? Austin Matthews even more than that? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this hockey season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONNHL. Prize Picks. Run your game.
Alrighty, so final segment time. We've got a lot of prospects to talk about because the Chicago Blackhawks have one of the best pools in the NHL in terms of prospects. And I think the conversation starts with Oliver Moore, their first-round pick from 2023. He's been decent so far this year, but still that inconsistency continues to plague him. He started the season with 5 points in 4 games this year, then went scoreless for 6 games, before putting up 6 points in his last 4 games. So it's still that up and down stuff that we've seen from Oliver Moore over the years. But what's constant in his game is the defensive ability and the elite skating. Those continue to be the kind of staples of his game. High pace, high energy, high motor combined with that really, really genuinely elite skating stride. Is a wonder to see in the NCAA so far. But in terms of production, he has he's really streaky, and that needs to come some ways. There's also John Mustard that we need to talk about. He was just picked in the 3rd round this past draft. That's been looking pretty good so far in the NCAA. Maybe the production isn't all up there, but he's still figuring it out. But the thing that made him special in this draft year was kind of similar to Moore, that pace with that speed. But the things that made him score so often in the USHL aren't working as well so far this year, right?
Not quite as much. I mean, he only has 5 points in 13 games so far this season with Providence College, which is less than fellow Blackhawks player Tage Harding, an older defenseman who also plays for Providence, has logged. But even so, I mean, as you mentioned, John Mustard was an absolute merchant last season in the USHL, especially in his curl and drag off the rush. That was how he scored his goals, and he scored many, many goals that way. That move has not quite worked as well against NCAA competition because the defensive structures are a lot more solid and consistent, and you can't just blaze into the offensive zone, fire a long-range shot off, and beat a goaltender the same way you can against junior competition. He's being forced to shoot from more perimeter areas from further out, but also has been struggling to beat goaltenders from range, which is understandable. It takes some adapting, and he was also a young player for his draft class, so it's understandable that's taken a little bit of time to adapt to the pace of the NCAA. But another NCAA player who was picked in the 1st round this past draft is Sacha Boisvert. And he's had a bit more of a smooth transition to the University of North Dakota with 11 points in 13 games. What have you liked of his NCAA performances so far this season?
Yeah, he's continuing to lean into his goal scoring elements, continuing to improve his physical tools and kind of ability to work through physical pressure. But he's also gotten really good at moving off puck and finding space in the offensive zone. I think that's how a lot of his points have come this season. He's not necessarily a guy who's going to lead the rush and beat a guy clean on his own entry and drive the net and all that stuff. He's a lot more intricate and meticulous with the way he creates his offense, and that's been really obvious so far in the NCAA so far this year. We also have AJ Spellacy, who's only picked a couple picks after John Mustard, who's been playing pretty good so far this year. I don't think the thing with Spellacy is he's never really going to put up that many points at the OHL level, but he's always going to be impactful. He's currently on a bit of a cold streak with 1 point in his last 6 games, but he's still his big, fast, physical self. He still plays like a running back, just attacking defenses head on, driving the net, creating havoc, creating chaos, and just being a very interesting profile of player. We'll remind you, this kid, just started playing hockey full time. He was almost going to commit to football, but ended up committing to hockey, and that really shows in the way he approaches the rush game. And very interesting prospect. 6'3", 210 pounds with blistering speed. That combination is already very, very interesting. We also have Nick Lardis to talk about, who's been producing really well in the OHL, right?
He absolutely has been. I mean, Nick Lardis really enjoys playing OHL hockey ever since being traded from the Peterborough Petes to the Hamilton Bulldogs in his draft year. He has been dynamic and just constantly putting the puck in the back of the net. Last season, he only got into 37 games with Brantford and scored 29 goals and 50 points in that span. But this season, he's been healthy so far, thankfully. And in 22 games, he has 23 goals and 36 points, which is very good if you hadn't noticed. And it puts him second as well in OHL goals. Tied for first in OHL goals with Michael Misa now. There's no longer that 4-goal gap that there had been earlier on this season. He's caught up and even has a game in hand relative to Misa. So just a fantastic goal scoring display so far this season for Nick Lardis. And he's doing all the same things he always has been. He's a pacey player who keeps his feet moving with high anticipation, the ability to find little pockets of space in the offensive zone and fire off shots with very little time or space necessary. So he's a born finisher, but he's been rounding out his game quite nicely as well. I've liked the effort level like on the back check, on the forecheck. And beyond that, the stick work, I think, is also taking a really big step since his draft year. He's really disrupting play a lot more defensively rather than just being passive and waiting for his teammates to create a turnover and then go lead a rush going forward and trying to score the other way. He's been a lot more impactful at 200 feet, which you need to see. And to see that progression paired with over a goal game pace, you cannot complain with his progress this year. And I'm curious to see how he'll do in the AHL next season. But next, we have another NCAA player, this time a defenseman, in Sam Rinzel, who is a dynamic, toolsy player, was very raw in his draft year, but he's really been progressing. I mean, last year he had 28 points in 39 games, and this year he's up to 14 points in 14 games, 6 of which have been goals. He's already tripled his goal tally from last season. He's been shooting the puck a lot more liberally, and that release, I mean, has always been a clear area of strength, right?
100%. It's been his best tool offensively. Interestingly enough, even though in his draft year he only had 9 goals in 27 games at the high school level, it's really been a mechanical force for him. And what it does is it creates so many rebound opportunities because it's hard for goalies to smother those pucks from the blue line. So even though he doesn't really pick corners or anything like that, it's just a powerful and well-placed shot with really good mechanical details, which makes him really interesting. But what's been really interesting with Rinzel this year is just the well-roundedness of his game. He's polished defensively now, making good reads in the defensive end. In transition, he pushes up, he activates quickly and efficiently and with the right timing. In the offensive zone, obviously he uses his release a ton to create, but he's also getting comfortable activating in the offensive zone, playing little give and goes from the blue line, that kind of stuff. So he's getting polished slowly but surely. And this is the kind of progression that, teams that draft out of high school dream of for these kinds of guys. They'll usually be very raw if they're playing high school hockey in their draft year, but Rinzel's decision-making processing has really improved, and that's been really impressive. Lastly, to kind of close things off here, we have a couple more guys to talk about. Jack Pridham, we want to highlight him because we're fully immersed in the whole CHL NCAA agreement and its ramifications. And Jack Pridham made the move from the BCHL to the OHL to join the it's not the London Knights, that's Blake Montgomery.
The Kitchener Rangers.
The Kitchener Rangers, exactly. So how's his game been so far?
Fantastic. I mean, this is a really speedy, pacey north-south attacker who has a plus-level shot and has also always had a really solid defensive impact. The playmaking game, I also think, has taken a bit of a step so far this season. And his play with Kitchener has been fantastic. I mean, 5 games played, 4 goals, 8 points. He's off to a blistering start, a better start than he had in the BCHL this season on a relatively weak West Kelowna Warriors team where he had 10 points in 12 games. But it's been a very comfortable transition for him so far. He's made for the OHL game with how he processes the play, how he constantly back checks as well. Like in the OHL, you're not going to get big minutes if you don't put in some level of effort going backwards unless you have like truly elite level talent on the offensive side of things. And he's been just like playing very solid hockey. I'm looking forward to watching more of him as well against this level of competition. And especially I'm excited to see how he'll do with Boston University next season. I think that'll be a fantastic program for him to land in the NCAA. But another player we wanted to mention is a player who's already playing with Boston University in the NCAA, and that is Ryan Greene, a physical, checking forward who plays really reliable minutes as a centerman for Boston University, a St. John's, Newfoundland product, and a player that I've always really enjoyed watching, and who progressed massively since his draft year, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The progression has really been in the overall intricacy of his on puck game. He's always been a really good stick handler. He's always been really good at manipulating in tight spaces and getting out of trouble. But using that stick handling to layer in deception, to fool defensemen into thinking he's going for a pass when he's going to shoot, rolling his wrists through his releases, all that's really progressed really well for him so far. So he's up to 10 points in 12 games this year, an entirely deserved production rate. He's currently the captain of the BU Terriers. Very, very good player with immense detail in his game. I think in terms of third line center projections moving forward for the Blackhawks, he's up there with the best of them. Lastly, let's talk about Adam Gajan, the last name we're going to talk about here in this segment and in this episode. Gajan has been pretty particular since his draft year. I mean, he was playing NAHL hockey at some point in his draft +1. But had a really, really good international showing and got picked up by the Chicago Blackhawks. How's he been so far this year?
It hasn't been the smoothest so far this season. I mean, even last year while playing massive minutes for the Green Bay Gamblers in the USHL, 43 games, he had an .893 save percentage, and so far in his rookie season in college hockey with the University of Minnesota Duluth, he has an .882 in 12 games so far with a 3.5 goals against average. So it's been a little bit rocky. I think with Gajan, he's always been a bit of a streaky goaltender where when he's hot, he is blistering, and when he's cold, he is just not really in the game as much. So we've seen him hot. I mean, at the World Juniors, he's been dominant for Slovakia twice now, the last two tournaments, and he's now also officially aged out from there. But one of the best goaltenders from the past couple seasons at the World Junior level. But so far in his league play in the NCAA, it's been a little bit hit or miss, but we'll see how he keeps progressing. Goalies are voodoo. We keep saying this, but their progression is wacky. It's never linear. It's always up and down. So we'll see how things keep going for Gajan. But at the moment, it seems like the brightest goaltending in the entire Chicago Blackhawks organization, top to bottom, is at the NHL level, shockingly, with Mrazek and Arvid Soderblom. So that's been a weird storyline of the season so far in Chicago, but I think that wraps things up here for us, right, Hattie? Like, I think we've covered the Blackhawks prospects pretty thoroughly here.
We've done the best we could. I'm sure we're missing names, but for today, that'll be it. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you're watching on YouTube, remember to like and subscribe. Let us know in the comments what you think of the episode, and if you're listening on your podcasting platform, as usual, let us know what you think through a rate and review, and make sure to make us your first listen of the day. For your second listen of the day, make sure to check out Locked On Sports Today. They've got all your news and updates about what's going on around sports, and make sure to tune in for our next shows as we finish up our prospect coverage for the month of November. This has been Hattie Kalikesh with Sebastian Hai, and we hope you tune in next time.